On the New York side of the river, they were not so lucky. The caisson sank deeper and deeper below the river without reaching solid rock. 50 feet. Many men were suffering from caisson disease. 60 feet. Still no bedrock. Hundreds of workers quit. One man died of the disease and then another, and Washington was horrified. If the digging continued, more men would die. But if he stopped the digging before the caisson rested on a solid surface, the tower might tip. He didn't want to risk workers' lives or the safety of the bridge, so he had to make the most difficult decision of his life. Washington worked day and night doing tests on the soil beneath the caisson. He discovered that it was hard-packed sand and gravel, a very solid surface. He concluded that it could support the bridge tower. The caisson was at 78.5 feet below the river when he gave the command, "Stop digging!" So, if you look at this, you have the tower. You might recognize these arches from the tower. And then you have more tower. This actually might be upside down, sorry guys. And then the water. And then this is all underneath water, and so it's the regular dirt and mud. And then you finally have the hard-packed sand and gravel where they were able to stop on the Manhattan side instead of the bedrock. So what do you notice about Washington Roebling in this? What does he have in his hand? Washington spent many hours in the caisson during this difficult time, and it made his disease even worse. Again, he was rushed to his home, doubled over in pain. This time, the attack was so bad he couldn't recover. Washington Roebling never returned to the bridge. From this day on, his only view of the construction was through binoculars from his bedroom window. So he and his wife Emily, they lived in an apartment that was in downtown Brooklyn or Dumbo, somewhere in that area, and he had an amazing view of the Brooklyn Bridge area and where the construction was, because if you recall, nothing could be taller than a, what was that? Hope you said church or a cathedral. Work continued thanks to Washington's wife, Emily Roebling. She was his only contact with the world outside his sick room. She carried his instructions to the men on the bridge and brought him progress reports. She talked with him about the work and became involved in making important decisions. In many ways, Emily Roebling took over for him. It would have been a challenge for anyone, but it was especially hard for Emily. At that time, women never worked on construction projects. Emily was not an engineer, but she learned a lot about suspension bridges from Washington and John Roebling. That knowledge, as well as her intelligence and calm manner, helped her to overcome the prejudice against her. She won the respect of all the workers, and they realized how important she was to the building of the Brooklyn Bridge. Emily Warren was born in 1843 in Cold Springs, New York. She was known for her quick wit and common sense. After her marriage to Washington, she and Washington traveled through Europe to study new ways of bridge building. On that trip, she gave birth to her only child, John Roebling II. He was born in Germany, right across the street from the house where his grandfather, John Roebling, had grown up. So John Roebling was the one who had his foot got stuck in the pier when the boat hit, and he thought that water would be the best way to get rid of an infection. When he was a kid, he lived in a town in Germany in a house, and right across the street, decades later, is where his grandson John Roebling II was born. So this is a picture of Emily Roebling talking with an engineer, and they're on top of the tower of the Brooklyn Bridge. And you can see nothing else is anywhere near as tall as them. So this is a real picture because pictures could be taken at this time. It's from 1872, and you can see the construction of it, and it's right next to a house, actually, if you really look. You can see some people on the tower. Digging the caissons had been carried out almost in secret. Only the workers really knew of the difficult and remarkable work that was being done in those underwater rooms and of the terrible hardships that they endured. The construction of the towers was very different. Every day, thousands of people watched in amazement from ferries and docks as 3 cranes, tall cranes, powered by noisy steam engines, hoisted each huge stone block high in the air and swung it into position. Excitement mounted as the towers grew taller. Since most buildings then were less than 5 stories high, this 25-story tower must have seemed stupendous. So in this picture here, you can see nothing's taller than our steeples. Something else that you can see is you can see all of the boats, and people are on the boats, and they're looking at the construction of this. There's a ferry. Just like, is there anything else on the skyline that we can know what it is? Like, this is Trinity Church, where Hamilton is buried. And then my guess is over here, this is the Customs House, or Fort Amsterdam. Yeah, okay. I forgot what I read today. Once the towers were finished, the 2 anchorages were built. A giant tug of war is constantly happening in a suspension bridge. The heavy roadway pulls down on the main cables, but the anchorages hold them firmly and keep them from sagging. Each anchorage weighs 120 million pounds. I'm going to say that again. 120 million pounds. That's like having 12,000 large elephants hanging on the main cable. So if you look at this picture here, we have the 2 towers. And then, because it's a perspective piece, the anchorage is right here. And it's actually near, if you have walked on the bridge, it's that entrance exit. It's basically right there. And that's what's holding down the cables into the ground to keep it firmly planted. Next, thousands of thin steel wires were strung from Brooklyn to New York. It was called spinning cable. Bundles of wires were wrapped together to make 4 main cables. Each cable contained over 3,500 miles of steel wire, which is long enough to stretch from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. So there was enough wire to go all the way across the country from Brooklyn to California. That is a lot. So here you can see the two towers and then one of the cables that's being held. This was the first time that a bridge had been built with steel cables. Before that, iron cables, chains, or even rope had been used, and there had been disastrous results. Let's be honest, rope, that thing is gonna pull and like break really easily. Chains, they're small links and the weight of it is gonna make them break apart. And then for iron cables, iron rusts. So you can't trust iron as what's gonna hold up a bridge because it doesn't work well when it oxidizes or when it mixes with oxygen. Washington wanted, bridges had collapsed because of weak cables. Washington wanted to make sure that his bridge was not a disaster. So he chose to use steel because it was stronger than iron. And it was another wise decision since then only steel had been used in this bridge construction. Okay. So we're gonna do a little math to get you to think about, because this doesn't really look that thick, right? This looks really like nothing. So let's do some math. Okay. So one steel wire is equal to one of our unsharpened pencils. Okay, so in our classroom I have those boxes of unsharpened pencils, and that is the same width and diameter of one steel wire. You have 278 steel wires in one strand. So one strand of wire has 278 wires in it. So that's 278 of my pencils. In one of those boxes, there are 72 pencils. So you need around 3 boxes to be the same amount as one strand. 19 strands is equal to 1 cable. So we're gonna do a little bit more math. 278 times 19, because we want to see how many steel wires are in one cable. So this is really hard for us to do in 3rd grade, so I'm going to split it up, and it's going to be 278 times 10 and 278 times 9. Much easier. So we learned that when you multiply by 10, you just have to add a 0 to what you have. Okay, for this, 9 times 8 is 72. So I do the 2, I bring up the 7, and I circle it so I know to not include it at first. 9 times 7 is 63, plus another group of 7 is 70. 9 times 2 is 18. 18 plus 7 is 25. So in one cable, one cable for steel wire, it is 5,282 steel wires in one cable. Now, if we have 4 cables, 2 carry the 3, 8, 11, 21. So In the entire Brooklyn Bridge, we have 21,128 steel wires that hold up the bridge. So we have the wire, the strand, the cable. Roebling had a little bit of a monopoly because Roebling owned his own steel company. So all of the steel that was used on the Brooklyn Bridge came from his own factory. And this is everything that we read today as a group, so enjoy.